So I think we'll just let her in, and then she'll tell us about the documentary. Good? Is she in? So can she hear me now? Hi, Angela, can you hear me?
Hi, good morning. I can hear you.
Excellent. Great to have you, Angela. Okay, so I said let me not keep you waiting for too long since we are still waiting on our callers, but they'll join us. But can you just introduce yourself to a lot of people listening and tell us a little bit about this documentary? Bless you, and good to have you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me on your show.
Bless you.
My name is Angela Onuora. I am the writer and director and producer of Operation Lights Out, the Story of CANAIRELIEF. It's a 90-minute documentary detailing and telling the story of the Canadian humanitarian effort during the Biafran War. I migrated to Canada about 9 years ago with my family, and after we found our base and settled in, I heard the amazing story of the Canadian humanitarian efforts that actually took the lives of 4 Canadians in the process during the Biafran Airlift, the largest non-governmental airlift mission in history, outside of the Berlin airlift, which was mostly run by global effort of the government during the war. This one was outside of that. This happened during the Biafran War, and there were more than 30 countries that were involved in this epochal effort that was, still the largest non-governmental relief effort in history.
Yeah, tell us the backstory, because it was a labor of love by a Canadian businessman, and he said we got to do something. And before then, there were lots of stories up on the news about the Biafran War and all of that. Tell us that backstory.
I didn't. Sorry, you were kind of cutting off. I didn't hear the question properly.
So I said it was sort of a labor of love, by a Canadian businessman, but there were lots of back and forth. There's a backstory to how that even started. Can you tell us that?
Okay, how the Canadian effort started. Well, when they saw what was happening, Canadians were already in Nigeria before the war. They came before independence, serving as mission staff to hospitals. They helped build hospitals, schools, and churches especially in the southeast, also in the north and the west. So they were already in Nigeria present before independence, and so they were very aware of the political tension in the country. And so when the war broke out, especially first of all the pogroms, they were also in the southeast, helping to tend to those who fled the north during the pogroms, and also in the west. And so when the war started, many of them left because all the world governments began to take the people out. They were ordering them to leave because the war was imminent. But some Canadians refused to leave. And even after some of them were forced out, they eventually found their way back in through Cameroon and different areas, back into southeast in Biafra, and began to tell the world what was happening in Biafra. The Irish priests were the ones who actually began this whole effort because they never left. They stayed in the southeast, reporting to the Vatican, telling them what was going on, and the Vatican immediately began to mobilize help. And so emissaries were sent out. People began to, the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, Ireland, Scotland, they all became involved quite quickly. And before you knew it, Germany, Amsterdam, all the countries became involved, even Switzerland. And then the US also became involved. And Canadians were asking for their governments to step in, just like the German government has stepped in and given their Catholic and Protestant churches about 8 million Dutch marks to start with. The US government was pumping a lot of money into this effort, but the Canadian government didn't quite step up. And that had its own there's a backstory to that, because the Prime Minister of Canada at that time, the senior Trudeau, they're from Quebec. And Quebec also had this history of secessionist movement. And in most cases, quite violent too. So he was quite he was quite well, would I say, careful about being seen to support a secessionist movement in Nigeria. And so for the most part, he didn't want to do anything. But the people got tired of asking and decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and do it ourselves. And so a private businessman, Jack Grant, a Jewish businessman, Jack Grant, someone, went to the churches and said to them, hey, what can we do? And in the space of 3 weeks, they had put money together and essentially bought a plane and, began to ask for help to raise funds to fly the plane to Sao Tome, where the relief effort was based. And they got involved like that. And before by the end of the war, they had bought about 6 planes and were flying relief efforts every night into Biafra fearlessly.
It was said that the Uli airstrip was like the second busiest airport in the whole of Africa while the war went on. I mean, can you tell us, about the ingenuity of the people and the loss of life and how they had to fly the planes amidst all of the chaos and all of the possible attacks?
Yes, the Biafran airstrip, the Uli airstrip, was the second busiest airport in Africa at the time of the war because it was receiving planes from different places, not just Sao Tome, because the churches were based in Sao Tome, but the Red Cross also at some point was also involved in that, and they were flying food in as well, and they all landed there. The Biafran government itself also had their military planes coming in, bringing in arms and supplies. So they had anywhere between 40 to 50 flights every night coming in, and sometimes even more. It was a very busy airport. So, and it was the most important piece of land in Biafra at the time because that was their only way out. Communications flowed through the Uli airstrip because they were also receiving planes that brought communications and journalists from Portugal, where Biafran office was. So it was a very interesting thing. And they had to also fly low to avoid the Nigerian ground shooters, and then also avoid the planes, because Nigeria had mercenaries in the sky trying to bomb and destroy the airstrip. So there was a lot of action. I wish at some point that somebody would make this into a Hollywood movie because it is Hollywood worthy. It's a Hollywood worthy story.
What are the reactions, positive and negative, you've gotten from this, owing to the fact that the wounds are still very fresh, even after many years after, and we don't talk about this enough?
In terms of the negative reactions to the film so far, I think a lot of people who don't really understand how the war started, they expect a one-sided story about the war, about and I want to be careful about using the word victimhood, but they do expect a certain side of the story to be one-sided. But the story of the war is much more than just the one side. And yes, there was a lot of victimhood especially on the Biafran side, there was. But there's also a larger story. And I feel like the more Nigerians get to know their history, we will find out that, we have a lot more in common than what divides us, especially linked to what our history is in terms of knowing how the war started and the elements that began this war and how this war could have been prevented if there was, sincerity of intentions. But again, I'm looking at it now, hindsight, and it says hindsight is 2020, but I don't want to judge the past too harshly because I wasn't there. And so it's impossible to actually, decide on what people should have done when you weren't even there. So that's why I'm being careful about that. But I feel like that is the only negative thing about it. People kind of expected a different story in terms of, why are you trying to explain the Nigerian side? Why are you trying to, and this is, for me, it's an objective story. I believe that if you have to tell history, you have to tell it objectively. And that was my mission for this film.
Right. So, what informed your research and your editorial background, and how did you employ balancing in telling the story? How did you research this? How did you even get funding? Because it was a colossal project, and I must have to say, I've had the opportunity to see it. It's very well made. The reenactment, for instance, I was like going to ask you, how did you get when to shoot the extra reenactment plots and all of that? And the quality and the standard, you have it on. How did you get all the funding all around that? How many years did it take you? And your research, who did your peer review for your research?
Thank you so much for that. I spent about 4.5 to 5 years making this film, and we continued to research until the film was finally done. The research it never stopped, actually, because everything for me it had to be verified, it had to be fact checked. If I didn't get 2 or 3 confirmations, I wasn't going to put it in the film, which is why I wanted to be objective about what I did. I can say that, yes, it was a labor of love for me because I spent a lot of my own personal money, but I did get grant funding from Canadian government, both from the regional level to the provincial level, even to the federal level. I was able to apply for arts grants, and because they believed in the story, because it's a Canadian story about an African war. So this is a Canadian story, and they love the idea of telling their history in a way that promotes how fearless and how humanitarian the Canadians are at their very core. So it was. It happened in multiple stages, but I did have to hire proper historical, archival researchers. It wasn't something I could do on my own. I did a lot of research reading on my own, but I had to hire the professionals who would give me reports, fact check everything I was going to, add to it. So it was very detailed, but I had a lot of help.
So this was across 4 to 5 years. I mean, it showed in the quality and disposition and the storytelling and all of that. So this property, we all know how the case and the talk about the Civil War and the Biafra was still very torturous in Nigeria and all of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, what does it intend to do in Nigeria? This is the story you've told. And what's the launch like? I'm sure you want to have a big launch in Nigeria. I'm sure probably the authorities might have their own opinions about that. Who are you talking with, on ground to be able to ensure that Nigerians also get a chance at this story?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Your plans for Nigeria.
Sorry?
Your plans for Nigeria.
Oh yeah, I would. The film is going to be available on Vimeo on demand by the end of the month, May 30th, to mark the anniversary of the declaration of Biafran independence. But for Nigeria, I have a few partners in Nigeria who are willing to show the film to the Nigerian audience, because it's important for me, beyond just showing it to the world. I also want Nigerians to learn about their history. So I have a few partners who are working on also distributing it in Nigeria, so Nigerians can see it on different platforms. And once that's made available, I will definitely keep you posted to that.
All right. And let's now talk about the peace, the fact that many years after you said something before that we shouldn't have fought the war. I want you to speak for peace amidst this diversity. We just had an elections that was really torturous, divisive. But we need to heal and come together as a country. With you having done some work as regard, a war that, funny enough, the events that led to the war also was a result of the cascading reaction from an election period, which was the 64 election. What would you like to say as regards the peace and coming together of this nation?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
What would you like to say as regards peace and coming together?
Okay. Seeing how the country kind of went into a meltdown of ethnic bigotry was very heartbreaking for me. At the end of it, I'm Nigerian and my heart is in Nigeria as always. And having researched this film and seeing the tragedy that Nigeria came to, I would say that no side won. That's, yes, the Biafrans lost. There was a lot of lives lost during the war, but you see, those lives were Nigerian lives as well, and could have impacted Nigeria in a positive way. So every single potential in those children and every single person that died in that war was lost to Nigeria. And so if anybody claims victory, it's a Pyrrhic victory, it wasn't a real victory. And I would say that seeing where Nigeria was before the war, especially Southeast Nigeria, where it was before the war, and then seeing how we haven't even completely healed from the war in terms of the bigotry, in terms of development, in terms of manpower and the capacity of the Nigerian intellect. We haven't completely healed from that war. And it is in our interest to find peace. It's in our interest to seek peace at all costs. It's in our interest, not just for us as we are right now, but for our children. The quality of the country we intend to leave to our children. It's very important to us to seek peace and to actually ask questions. I feel like when we're told things, we listen to people on their podcasts spewing hate and spewing propaganda. We need to become more curious as to what the truth is. Do more reading, fact checking. We need to be more active in learning our history. It's not something that somebody can give to us. We as a people, we have to begin to want to know our history. What is our history? Who are we as a people? We have to be actively looking for information about who we are, both ethnically and as a country, because that is the only way to find peace in terms of if we find out that we can do this together, we can. If Europe, fought the World War and eventually found peace and has become very developed, we can do this. There is nothing that actually stops us from becoming one of the greatest countries in the world. We have the people, we have the brain capacity, we have the intellect. You hear about Nigerians doing so well abroad. This is Nigerian capacity. This is who we are as a people. We're people of excellence, Black excellence. Why isn't that translating in Nigeria? It's because we don't know our history. That is my opinion. I feel like the more if we become very deliberate about seeking out our history, we will begin to learn more about who we are versus trying to fight each other.
Thank you so much. And we need to come together and we need to unite. Does it, you're going to allow my next guest coming on the Google Meet? We need to come together. We need to stay strong. Thank you so much. We're looking out for the distribution channel of the film, on the 30th. Bless you so much. Really appreciate you, Angela, for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. Bless you, Angela.